When Steel talks, everybody listens.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. Really excited to be chatting here with these guys. Just a real quick starter. Come on in, guys. And if you see some people out there, bring them in. Just a quick starter. Can I get a show of hands, like anyone who is here who's an integrator? Can you raise your hand? Nobody? Who works at like a media company in some capacity? Okay. Who's like in the rental and staging or like broadcast world as like an engineer? No? Okay, cool. All right, well, we just wanted to get a little bit of that. My name is TJ Krusinski. I work at Facebook, produce live video content for our marketing teams and a few others. Joining me today, we have Dan Swiney from LinkedIn. John Williamson from Cisco TV, and Alex Lindsay from Pixel Core. So what we're going to talk about is just different methodologies and approaches to getting video from your event site or show site to your ingest server, what opportunities there are in the market to do that, just different approaches in making that happen. So Dan, why don't we start with you? Can you share a little bit about just give us some context as to a little bit about your role and then your tiering structure and then kind of your approach to those different events that you may be doing at LinkedIn.
Sure. So I manage the live production and streaming team at LinkedIn, and you may not immediately think what kind of streaming we might do there, but we do everything from internal facing, so sort of be our entry-level meeting spaces, larger meeting spaces where we use, actually use Blue Jeans and Blue Jeans Prime Time for some basic sort of DIY streaming. It's internal focused only. Then we move up to our larger internal events. We have our company all hands, which is every 2 weeks, where our CEO speaks to the whole company. That is happening right now. So if I suddenly disappear off stage, something has gone horribly wrong. That is actually using full broadcast infrastructure. So that is, we talk gear, it's Grass Valley cameras and switchers. We have backhauls between locations from like San Francisco down to Sunnyvale to allow us to connect all the different locations that are viewing that. To jump up one more from that, we have our internal, but it's a sales kickoff event, which is a large conference, not too dissimilar from this, but it's actually internal based for our sales teams. Those are we did 3 of those this year around the world. And then really our top most complex production-wise event is Talent Connect, which was just last week, and that is our version, smaller, of the Salesforce Dreamforce show. And that's where we're really using the most, that's where we have the largest budgets, and that's where we have the opportunity to have redundancy, multiple paths back, and so that would be our top tier right now.
And what like encoding technologies are you using for that top tier? So
that last week we used the switch as our main transport. We have high vision with SRT encoders that are helping us in either backup capacity, or we're using that to transport streams back during rehearsals, so we're not paying for the switch time. And then we have live view as our sort of backup to the backup system.
Cool. And what distribution channels are you going to?
We went through Faceplace, is that what it's called? Facebook, that's the one.
Yeah,
Facebook, YouTube. We use Livestream. We pay Livestream, they're relatively inexpensive to get a nice solid base stream with support. And then from Livestream, you can simulcast out to Facebook, YouTube, and those are Twitter. Actually, Twitter and Facebook are where we get most of our views for those external facing pieces. Internal, we use Intercall and a peer streaming delivery system with Collective and maybe a little bit of Hive mixed in there too. And we also use Microsoft Teams. LinkedIn is now owned by Microsoft, so we use Microsoft Teams and Broadcast for our distribution.
Cool. We'll dive into that more in a second. John, would you share a little bit about your work?
John Williamson, Senior Manager for the engineering team. We have 7 locations worldwide. We do about almost 2,000 broadcasts a year. Same with LinkedIn, we have a lot of events, meetings, and 200-300 people. We have a sales and an external facing content that we do session capture, pearls, key pros, and stuff like that. Backhauls are usually ASI on Vivix with TT backup. And then, the larger events, we do a company meeting every month. It rotates around the world. we sort of follow the CEO or the executive staff, and that's all done on telepresence.
Gotcha. So just VC codecs connecting those locations?
Yep.
You bring that back to a broadcast facility where it's all managed? Gotcha. Cool. Alex?
Pixcore, we just solve problems for people. We don't really have, we mostly handle complex live events somewhere in the world. Usually, most of what we do currently is stuff that generally is extremely high profile, or where we have hundreds of thousands of concurrent views, or complicated. Different parts of the world, multiple locations. We have kind of a mixture of contribution, interaction, and backhaul. So if we have to do real-time two-way communication, because a lot of our stuff is multi-continent, we'll be dealing mostly with the switch, some Vivix to do two-way connections.
And then for folks that may not be familiar with those services, can you quickly give a lowdown on the switch and Vivix?
Sure. The switch and Vivix are basically video. It's video over IP, but very low latency. So it's a very low latency, high stability. We have, knock on wood if I can find it, for the switch, we've probably used it for a couple thousand events, and the only issues we've had is a couple hours before somebody routes it the wrong way, but once we're connected, we're in, and so it's a highly, from our perspective, a highly stable connection. Even with that highly stable connection, it's rarely our only connection. So our kind of standard thing to have laying around is some kind of cellular bonded. We roll our own with a PepWave occasionally, using a Vitech HEVC IP with 60 to pull it back, or we use Dejero.
The PepLink device that's the brand.
It's a bonded, yeah, PepLink. So PepWave, sorry.
PepWave, yeah.
It's a brand of bonding. So you have a head unit, much like a LiveView, a head unit in your office that takes advantage of your bandwidth, and then you just add your own modems. We still do use a Dejero when we want to make it easy, which is pretty much the same as a LiveView as far as bonded cellular. So that's kind of a thing that we just kind of always use. We have some version of that, and then when allowed to, we will still want to use a satellite or the standard IP connection, that we have
to get
there.
From show site to
show site to where we encode. We encode some on site, so we use elementals. So when on site, if we're doing multi-room, we might use, we have a couple 600s and 700s, so we'll use those for multi-room. If you're doing 8 rooms, it doesn't make sense to backhaul them as much. We'd rather just push them all into one elemental and push them out. So we primary and backup for those. But for a lot of stuff, we like to backhaul it back to our DC facility. We have a facility where the teleport is and where Eurovision sits in DC. Because of that, we have 26 dishes on the roof, fiber into the White House, fiber into the Hill, fiber. The switch is 100 feet from our office. So it's a nice tight connection. So the reason we like that, I think the reason that we like to send it back in multiple hubs is if one fails, it's actually going through a switcher. So if we see it fall apart, we have an operator sitting there. If one piece fails, they manually are moving it, switching it over to another thing, or putting up a slate if they all fail, or if there's an issue at the event. So we're able to kind of, and we can even do things like, for some events, we'll run it through an EBS and slow it down by a couple minutes to make sure that if there's any catastrophic event, we can manage it. So those all nowadays, they mostly get backhauled to DC and then mixed to there.
Dan, I know you guys are starting to do some remote production with some of your larger events. Can you kind of describe briefly what that workflow looks like and how you've evolved into that?
Yeah, I mean, I realize that what I describe is everything event-based, which is really what this talks about. We have studios there that we crank out live shows for, but those we have really full control over the network team there. So for the remote side of things, we have a number of Connect series. So there's Talent Connect, and there's a number of other ones. And what we'll do is it's really going to be based on partner budget, and that budget is often driven by expected audience. So if there's either a very small but a very important audience, or a huge wide audience, then it tends to be those budgets are increased, and then we're able to bring in full production. But we have a show next week here in New York that is going to be just very basic. It's going to be a large conference room, heavy AV, but single. It's going to go over one path. In this case, a Teradek bond as opposed to LiveView.
So you'll use the on-site network
Well, there isn't
take
much
the
of an on-site
program.
network is the issue, so there's 50 meg that's shared between everybody at the tenant, so you
Sure.
basically can count that one out.
Sure.
And so for us, it's about setting expectations. We actually recommended to not stream it because we're using our backup is our primary, right? So we're saying, no, we're putting that out there. We don't recommend this. There is no opportunity for failure. And because the expectations are set and the risks are relatively low, it's going to be an internal only audience. The content partner made the call. You want to do it, we're happy to still produce it. But sometimes there's a little bit of politicking or a little bit of discussion, just making sure you're setting those expectations about what is possible. If everything is based on, a phone streaming out there, but it has to get out there, then you're setting yourself up to be
And managing those expectations in writing.
Yes.
That's very
In
important.
contracts or
Yeah.
whatever you can.
Yeah. So then with the tear deck, you're just pointing to one location, your internal streaming.
Yeah, this one will
Pretty
be,
straightforward.
it's just going to go to unlisted YouTube just because they want to be able to put it throughout the venue as well. But
Yeah.
I mean, it is a,
So unlisted, so you'll actually put like internal content on a unlisted YouTube.
internal audience. The content's actually external.
I gotcha.
Fake can be external, but
Sure.
he doesn't have time to, again, we talked to them, they didn't really have an established audience.
Sure.
We're just told we should stream these things, so we're going to
Yeah,
stream them. Right?
gotcha.
So that sometimes that comes up, and it's
Yeah.
sort of our job as producers to explain the benefits, both from the distribution side of things and also the audience side, just to set expectations.
Yeah. Got it.
And the same thing, a lot of times someone will come to us and drive, hey, we want to go do something, and we haven't been to the venue, there's no connectivity, and that sometimes drives the solution,
Yeah.
and they're willing to take more risk, which is really cool.
Can you give an example of, I know like one of your larger events is like GSX or Cisco Live, just a brief overview of what that like kind of general session stream workflow looks like?
So for Cisco Live, it'd be the same as here. It's a huge event. We take over all the properties in Las Vegas or someplace like Orlando. We plan it for about 6 months. We stage everything in San Jose. We actually fly teams out, completely inspect all the fiber and all the infrastructure that we're going to use. Gets documented if there's anything that needs to be repaired.
And it's fiber within the facilities, right?
Yeah, so we're leasing fiber within the facilities. We do everything uncompressed. The only thing we're really using the network for is, for control of content. Everything gets sent back to ASI over Vivix. So we do all the encoding back in San Jose because we have a controlled environment.
So do you bring everything locally on that show site from all the different venues to one space, like master control space, and then that enters Vivix, just a single channel where you're doing like a linear playout?
We're doing 100 meg and then we're doing 4 channels back. And so we have a primary and then basically they're just tie lines. And, and then we have a backup channel. And then we do the same thing on telepresence because we have that product.
Yeah. And then in San Jose, you have encoding that then gets, delivers that via RTMP to the different...
We use Brightcode, so that's where our OVP's at, and then we'll use our encoders to do, if we want to do YouTube or Facebook or Periscope encoding.
Gotcha. And do you use like a restreaming service for those things, or?
We just started to use a couple, and
Yeah.
we've been trying Restream right now, so we can do a single stream out of some of the smaller events. Like on your event where it's bandwidth constricted, we'll try and get one stream out and then do the replication out on the cloud.
Yeah. Okay. One other important thing with streaming is accessibility, so closed captioning is an important thing to consider. How does that fit into the overall workflow?
We use it
Alex?
all the time. Probably 4 years ago, we got maybe 2 or 3 requests a year, and now it's 80% of the events.
Yeah.
And it's not as, so for some people it's ADA, but and it's kind of a corporate position. For a lot of folks, especially if they're streaming to a social platform, because it's going to come up with the closed captioning, it's really a way to hook people into watching the rest of the event. So they're gonna see it go by on their feed. And having that text is more of a marketing decision than it is an ADA decision.
Would you see in the non-live content all the time on social channels the big text on the top and bottom, right? Because people's sound is off by default, etc. Right. So it's a way to kind of bring them in to get them to stop scrolling.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what most of our clients are using it for.
Yeah.
we use 608, 708, and we just insert it into the bank data. And so we're using an EEG 492, which I think is kind of the standard, what everybody uses. We don't use anything in the cloud. We used to, with YouTube, we used to use, of course, the HTTP inputs. The one advantage of the HTTP input is that you can have different captioners jump on and if you have a really long event, there's not any real hookup or unhook or anything else that you have to worry about with that you would have typically with like ICAP. But what we like about the 608, we're doing we stream to a lot of, multi-stream a lot. And we do it mostly internally, so we'll get that signal, and we'll add the captioning in DC, and then from there we're sending it to 3 Facebook pages and a YouTube stream and Twitter and everything else. And so by inserting it into the SDI signal there, it means that it's going out to all of that. It's all the same, and it's all going with it. And so it's just easier. It's an easier workflow for us.
Yeah. I guess, Dan, so sometimes you will bring in coders on site, like you mentioned, for that event next week. Other times you'll push things off site. This could be a question for all of us. What are those factors that go into deciding, like, do I want to bring in a satellite truck to get this video off site and encode it remotely, or am I just fine with like an elemental here on site? Like, how do you go about that decision-making process?
Yeah, as you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it. The venue in particular is one. What facilities they have available there. If you've done that event before at that venue, it really helps to know what you're walking into. But it's audience driven and budget driven all the time. So
do you feel like you can depend on the network, like in a facility, in a general sense?
General sense, no. So if you talk about like Las Vegas, some hotels you go to, they have the latest and greatest, and it's all spec'd out. Other ones, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all about going out and doing that site visit and seeing what you're in for.
Yeah.
From both the internal delivery of content back, and then also just on the backhaul side. So I guess to answer your question, there are multiple factors. The ones that we often concentrate again are audience and budget, because if there's budget there to be able to give you multiple layers of redundancy, and that's what it's about. We're looking for quality, but we're looking for redundancy all the way through.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes the expense goes the other way as well. So it's sometimes with some hotels and with some facilities, it's actually cheaper to throw the switch in. These hotels have started to get a little bit smarter about the process. For a long time, you could say, hey, I'm going to throw a switch circuit in, and then you'd add an MMC circuit to it, and now you're getting 1 gig of IP as well as your video. Yeah. And now most of them are savvy enough to understand that you've just bypassed the thing that they were charging you $40,000 for. So, so now you have to kind of negotiate that. But sometimes, for some of these facilities, it's cheaper to open up a switch circuit, even at $4,000 or $5,000, than it is to pay the $10,000 per or $1,000 per meg that you're going to get.
Yeah,
and it's getting cheaper now. I mean, getting Vivix with a switch in some places is under $1,000.
Right.
And we're doing,
if it's not already there, because honestly, it's pretty common now. Any larger venue space has that.
The fiber's already there. They're just bringing it. Terminal gear in.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the things we look at too is when we go into a venue, when you're asking a lot of questions, a lot of people forget to ask, is the Wi-Fi and the wired on the same network? Yeah. And, if you don't ask that question, someone says, yeah, I've got 100 meg, but then you're sharing that with, 20,000 people, you don't have 100 meg anymore.
And you want to start asking for, like, are you building me a separate VLAN? Do I have guaranteed bandwidth? Do I have,
do you know how to shape it?
Yeah, and if they don't answer that really fast.
Or if they don't know what you're talking about. Then
and what you don't want to hear is that you're going to type a code in on your laptop. Anything that has I'm going to log into a laptop and give you a code. Well, number one is our Meraki switches and our elementals. I can't do that. It's not, and in addition to that, that code can be shared. We had an event a long time ago that the hotel, of course, we were told we were going to have dedicated bandwidth and we needed this much and everything else, and we tested it all day. All day we've got 100 megs, 100 megs, 100 megs, and they gave us a special code, and they said, well, you're the only one with that code. Of course, there's all these VIPs, and they gave them to the VIPs, and so as the VIPs showed up, it was it went from 100 megs in half an hour down to a meg.
Yeah.
Right before the show, of course. And
always. That's always when those problems pop up, because you didn't have 5,000 people in the room, right?
That's the hardest thing.
Right?
And that's why, like, for instance, live views, you have to be careful with, or anything that's a bonded cellular. People say, oh, that's great, but okay, if you go to an arena, you know, there's a lot of people using those cell sites, you know, and you're competing with all of those cell sites, or you go to a big press event. You know, one of the things we worked with a candidate in the last presidential election, and they were having trouble with it, but they had 40 live views were showing up at the rallies, and so we were like, it started working just because I brought a SATRA. Like, I was like, I'm not gonna.
It's funny because LiveView like sends out those emails. I don't know if you get them, like, hey, this big event's coming up. Be sure to rent your LiveView. And then you show up. There's 60 live views or how many live views, and none of them work.
The other piece of that is if you walk in here with a LiveView and you're looking for the LiveView to back up for the hardline connection that you have here, chances are those all connect before they go out anyway. So those hard lines are using repeated cellular repeaters within this hotel. So if that main line goes down, that LiveView is really stretching to try and find.
Which is important to get your LiveView antenna out of the building, right? Well, and put it out of range of the DAS system.
I think the new ones you can sort of tell them to reach it, to hit further beacons, right?
And on the other side of that, your satellite, you know, your satellite can get rain. You know, so KU is going to be more susceptible. A lot of times for the most important stuff, we'll try to bring in a C-band truck, which takes up a lot more space, but it definitely works through that. And we've had, but we use the cellular to back up the cellular to back up the satellite. So we get heavy rain. We've had heavy rain and switched over to the, to the cellular as a backup.
And we've had events. We don't use satellite anymore at all unless there's some place that like just does not have anything. But we've had one event, you know, where somebody actually came up on our transponder, and the telepresence backed up the feed. So you know that doesn't happen very often, but it can.
We had an event where a helicopter flew between and hovered between our sat dish and the satellite. And we were just like, what's breaking it up? And we couldn't figure it out. We looked outside, there's a helicopter right there. We were like, anyone do it?
John, in terms of like scale, obviously that's a big part of the operation you run. How do you make sure that each event is going to be reliable from like an equipment standpoint? Because you manage a lot of your own equipment for the events.
We do. So we've sort of keyed out technical managers, technical directors, and A1s is the key personnel that we have internal. And then that way we have repeatability out in the field. And then we have a really defined workflow around punch list on site, asking those basic questions. If somebody doesn't give us the right answers, we should be terrified really quick.
Yeah, checklists are huge.
And then we go out, if it's a huge event, we'll do a site visit, we'll inspect the fiber, we'll clean it, we'll take pictures of the glass. We'll predetermine if stuff needs to be re-terminated, and we've even re-terminated stuff, which is probably unusual for a vendor. We keep a running list of all the spaces that we've done so that we have a database so we can go back and say, Dan comes in and says, hey, I want to do an event at the space. I'm like, oh, you know, go talk to TJ, he's your point of contact for the space. And we stage everything. So nothing leaves the plant unless it's been staged, documented. We have drawings end to end, which we give both to the AV vendor for, you know, partnering with somebody, and with the network team. So when we show up, we know exactly the path that we're going to go from point A to point B. The telecom orders in for the switch or Vivx. And so, you know, it's just about really being detailed. And
so why is it that you guys, so you're that equipment you're talking about is your encoders, right?
Well, we have encoders. We have a broadcast rack, which has basically a router, a SAN/NAS. We've identified a lot of equipment that we rent a lot, that we stripped out of the rental costs. And so
you just brought it on, purchased it, it's yours, you made it.
And we've not done, we haven't done cameras and stuff like that because it just, first of all, we have to have a place to store it, then you have to have a shipping and receiving department, you have to have somebody that QAs it, and there's other people like LMG or CT and stuff like that, or World Stage that do a great job. So we've really identified the pain points and stuff that we want to have control of. And then, you know, we either go rent, you know, from a vendor or a managed service to bring some of the other stuff in. But the core infrastructure within a building, whether it's the network or fiber, you know, we make sure that we own it from start to finish because we found that that's, you know, where the pain points are. We've been in a venue to sort of talk out of bound a little bit. We were at the Waldorf Astoria, old place, couldn't get any glass in, so we used the ASI encoder in the venue and did a BNC to UTP to go the 50 feet to get into a closet and turn it back into glass. So sometimes you have to be really, you know, we had telepresence in the room, but sometimes you have to be really creative sometimes in some of the older vendors.
How much of that, sort of, so if you have 20 cases that are going, how much of that is redundant? How much of that is what, just in case? Like, what if you got a stack of, probably all have a stack of decimators that we carry with us?
Or just, yeah, just redundancy in general. Like, so
No,
Always two paths.
Where are they? They should be here so we can.
I think we all, yeah, we have decimators, like everybody has a decimator. Like
decimators are like just the best thing. You can throw them away when you're done.
You know a lot of
great.
you know a lot of things happen unexpectedly when you just see a whole bunch of little red boxes floating around. Like, oh, somebody asked for something.
That was not the plan.
Yeah.
And we have some tier 3 events that are partnerships with maybe some .org, where we'll do encoding on site with no redundancy, direct to stream. And you know, we've had a couple events where we've had 4,000 or 5,000 people watching, and without an issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's those times when just a single encoder plugged into, you know, a single camera going to the ingest is fine. You know, that's the fine solution. But yeah, I think
we try and push the envelope and try and come up with new ways of doing things, and sometimes you have problems that come up to force you to come up with new ways of you know, solving problems.
Alex, you were talking earlier, you mentioned you have a Meraki, which is a Cisco product. Is a cloud network management.
Switches and routers.
Switches and routers in the cloud. But what it allows you to have control over your equipment remotely.
Yeah, so
can you talk about that workflow a little bit?
Yeah, so we do the same thing where we build all of our kits ahead of time, and in each one of the Meraki routers, we define all the equipment. All the equipment sits on DHCP, but we define it all within the Meraki cloud. So when it's
MAC address, right?
It's against its MAC address. Yeah. So then basically we can say this is always going to get a .50. So the switchers are always .50, and the routers are always .52, and the Behringer X32 is .75. You know, like whatever those numbers are.
Yeah.
And so what that allows us to do is we pretty much don't put anything into the system that we can't control remotely. Right. So by doing that, as soon as we have to negotiate getting the Meraki connected, but once it's connected, it just ties into the board, and then all of your equipment is now remotely available, which in a secure environment, we have some clients that don't think that it's a good idea. But for the most part, you know, it's a very secure VPN. And what it means is that a lot of times, you know, we have a great audio engineer, but he can't be everywhere at one time. And so what we do is he can just log in and, you know, sort something out. Mm-hmm. We had and then I can also log in and adjust cameras. We had a situation where we had point-to-point from San Francisco to Chicago. We were having an audio issue because the client that we had didn't want to have an IFB. From a security perspective, we weren't allowed to touch him. But he also they didn't want to lav. And so we had a shotgun mic with an open speaker. And we were using a Dugan auto mix to kind of get that all working, but it was really tricky, you know, to get it just right where you don't start getting feedback and everything else. And so couldn't quite get it right, and we just asked, and he was managing the other side. So he just logged in, he's listening to it in the room that he's working in, and then tuning the switcher, or the mixer that we're using in San Francisco while he's listening to it. So it's kind of an odd, you know, and then I didn't like the camera return that I was getting. So I just logged into we had the Blackmagic switcher. I just logged into the switcher and logged into the camera, and I just told the camera operator, I just need you to pull your hands away for a second. And I just reshaded the camera. Yeah. So once you get used to that kind of experience, it's really hard to go back, because you don't want to, you can talk to your operators. We do a lot of, we've done over 1,000 multi-city events, so we're tying in 5 or 6 cities at one time. You can try to sit there and talk to operators remotely. Do this and do this and do this, or you can
over the phone. Everyone's done that,
or comms or whatever, and then you just log in, you know. And even down to the comms, you know, we're using we use ClearComm because it's the most flexible, you know, from IP to Dante to local. It allows us to cover it. Yeah.
You know, because sometimes your subject matter expert's not in the room. It is really what you're saying.
And sometimes you have a great A1 or a great engineer, but they're not the guy. You know, like there's some little thing that somebody knows, and we can just from anywhere in the world just have that person, you know, go in and fix that and then pull out. So that the Meraki or some kind of, you can do it in a lot of different ways, but for us,
an easy product to accomplish this with.
the interface works, it's easy, it always works. So
now it won't next time you go to use it because you said that. So,
sorry?
I said now it won't because you've said that.
I know.
Next time you go to use it.
I know, yeah.
So you mentioned something that we'll be talking about the tech, this, and sort of how to do it, but
Same thing. We survey, debrief, internal clients, external clients, because at the end of the day, the services that I provide to the team, if people don't want to consume them because we're not providing the service, then they have no value.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm constantly trying to find freelancers all over the world. So if I have a job in India,
that are competent in the streaming side of things, right?
Well, in video production, audio production, it's one of those things that you also have to get used to what the culture is there, what the rules of engagement are in every, like India has a very specific rule of engagement about how camera operators work versus the camera assistants and you have to understand who you're talking to and how you're asking for it, and everything else is all different than what we would do here. And so, same thing in Africa. We have a school in Rwanda, so that's the easiest place for us to work because they all do it exactly the way we show them how to do it. But in general, we're always trying to, like I do dinners or drinks or whatever. I'll do an announcement on sometimes on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Hey, I'm in Rome. I'm in London. Let's go have beers. And it's just the people who know me, that will show up, and it's 5 or 6 people show up.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's 1 or 2 of those folks you start talking to, but you're constantly networking to try to find people.
Which is a best practice in itself, which is just maintaining relationships. Facebook groups are a great way to do that.
I pretty much, if you have on Facebook, LinkedIn, I'm a little bit more precise about who I, get connected to. But on Facebook, if you're holding a big camera, a Steadicam, a jib, or a shotgun mic, I friend you. Yeah. I like you. I literally have 2,000 people I'm connected to around the world, and I needed an A1 in New York, and I just was like, I just pinged one of the guys that had a dead cat. Not a real thing, dead cat. And he said, "Oh, I'm not available." Handed me off someone, kind of perfectly good guy,
For us internally, we try and send the TD and the A1 to any remote
And TD,
site.
you mean the switcher operator?
Yeah, the technical director. So in that case, we're always getting at least a consistent look.
Sure.
And then if we do some place that's got, maybe English is not our first language, we'll try and get somebody that's calling the show that does both. And so then our technical director is now just TDing and not calling the show.
TD and the A1, and especially the A1. We probably have 4 A1s that we use anywhere in the world, and if we can't book one of them, we think about whether we should be doing this show.
But this is for the broadcast audio, right?
For the broadcast, for the broadcast audio, audio is the thing that bites you more than anything else, and it is the most important part of because people will look at bad video for a long time, they will not listen to bad audio for very long.
And it's ironic because the autoplay typically is muted. So if you get someone in with the captions, and then when they start hearing, it's critical for them to retain, viewership that the audio is clear.
There's so many things that can go.
And we do a lot of telepresence, so we do a lot of mixed minuses, and so we have a more complicated audio setup. So for us, having that consistency, we've got 6 people globally that we pull on, but they, work for us full time.
And what about just the actual streaming engineer, the person who's sitting behind the encoder? How do you guys look at that as a role in the event?
we split it up. We have a stream op, so someone who's literally taking care of, not quite distribution, but the platforms piece, and then part of...
Which is actually making the posts, getting the players
actually
embedded,
getting the RTMP all set up, getting all those distribution channels, and then just monitoring them all. So we have a huge monitor wall where they're literally just watching all these different pieces. And then the engineering, the streaming engineering piece is part of the EIC's role. We just we don't always have a dedicated person for that. And they're the ones actually in the Elementor or whatever encoder we're in. And so we debated whether it stops at the SDI or whether it goes through there, and we sort of ended up at engineering gets it all the way to the platform, and then production takes care of it from there.
And we do a little bit different. We have IT owns the platforms. The minute it goes into an IP space, our internal infrastructure team owns that.
Yeah.
And then we have transmission people, which are basically the people that run the encoders, do the scheduling on the platform and manage it all the way up to the port. And we have dedicated people in every space.
Yeah.
And we have 4 people in San Jose.
So they're just monitoring 24/7. They have like
Turn
a
the
schedule?
stream up, do the
Yeah.
bookings, do the quality control. We turn the stream up a couple hours ahead of time. We do an end-to-end test from a venue or even internal.
Yeah.
So we have, a really mature workflow around that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our engineers generally either in our DC facility or at another facility. They're almost never on site.
Yeah.
So, and the reason we do that is we actually don't want them to get caught up in all of that.
Yeah.
And so we want them to be kind of separated. They're connected to the elemental. They're looking at the stream, but they're kind of in a quiet space. And they don't need to. They just need to tell us whether they're seeing signal or not.
Same with us.
For large, and so in DC we have everything from Android phones and iPhones and stuff laying around that they're all looking at all of those things. There's important things like knowing what it's going to sound like when it's summed on a mono speaker. So so it's important to look at it through the phone.
Yeah.
So so we have someone kind of looking at all of those things. We have a big monitor wall, and what we do is when on site we have scope. We actually like software-defined scopes, so we're using Scopebox for video and Spectre for audio because I can rearrange everything and get it exactly the way I want it, rather than dealing with whatever somebody thought was a good idea.
The Tektronix stuff is so cool, man.
The Tektronix stuff is cool, but I like to be able to. What we did is we tested it against the Tektronix. We were like, it's the same. It's exactly the same, except I have so much control.
It's not analog, so it's not like you need these high-end components and stuff.
It's just coming in, and so we have racks and racks and racks of Mac Minis that are just looking at the stuff and then putting it up. Now what we like to do is we like to look at that signal coming in, and then we like to look at the stream, and then we're monitoring the stream. And so we're looking at audio and video. What the most typical thing for us to do is audio is going to come in, the house audio is going to want to come in at -10, -12, and if you pass that right through, everyone on the stream is going to be, it's too soft. Right. So what we do is we'll go in the elemental and just bump that by 6 to 8 dB, and just push it up. Especially if it's going to be VOD, we pull back a little bit because we don't want to overmodulate. But if we know that it's going to be live and then they're going to take it down and then put up a VOD later, then we'll get pretty aggressive about it to make sure that it's as present as possible for the online audience. But we're looking at you're just looking at both scopes and just seeing where they sit as you work.
We're back to the A1 again.
Yeah.
If you have a really strong person doing a mix,
yeah,
you have a consistent, both live and log.
Yeah, very important.
Especially with the complexity that you talked about. We do the
And
same
with our
thing.
A1, we'll do that. With somebody else's, a lot of times we're getting it from rooms and trying to argue with an A1 about -10 versus -3 or 6.
And that's a good point. So we'll split the room, like if we're doing a large event, there may be a front of house that's doing the room, but we'll have a different engineer which will submix for broadcast, which is our person.
With its own, like getting all the stems and then
all the stems, yep. So we'll completely
Do you use
submix.
stems or do you have a split?
We do mics and some of the audience, feedback, but we'll do VTs and mics on different, inputs.
We've actually taken multiple rooms and we stick them all into a CO5, and then we just give everybody MIDI controllers. And the union ops don't appreciate it that much, but they just have MIDI controllers that they sit there and they work through, and it means that we have one person that can jump from room to room to room and manage all of and basically have absolute control over every room from an audio perspective as needed, and that's for the broadcast, not for the for the room. There's someone in the room doing it.
Yeah. So I think we're coming close here to the end, but what would you, really quick, like piece of advice to someone who produces live video, either from something that burned you in the past or that would be fun?
Don't trust anything. You don't take anything for granted. Everything you pay, the thing that you're not paying attention to or you think is handled is going to be the thing that gets you.
Yep.
You just go in and you don't trust the internet, don't trust the video, don't trust the audio. Just be asking people, put people in that you trust.
My key word is assumptions always have bad outcomes.
Same
Always.
idea, yeah.
Hope is not a strategy.
Nope.
Yeah.
I think it's just work with good people, work with people that you either worked with before or that are recommended, and put them through the paces on pre-pro, whatever it is. If you have any doubts, hit pause right there or readjust.
Yeah. Totally.
Have teams that own it. If they touch it, they'll own it. That helps a lot.
Find ways to do lots of reps. Get people to do internal streams, do test streams, don't have it be like if you're only doing 8 big events a year or a month. We try to figure out how to stream every day. We're doing some kind of stream every day.
Not doing a production for a while burned me just recently, so I hear you. I'm right there with you. We have a few minutes. 5 minutes. Happy to field any questions. So Obviously, a big focus on like event production and live streaming for events. But Richard has a mic here that he will run over to you if you care to. Make sure it's on there.
Check.
Yeah.
Hey guys, great job. Thank you for your insights. Quick question: how do you guys get end user kind of feedback regarding like the video quality? So you know, whether it's buffers, join times, exits, whatever it might be. How are you getting that closed loop from an individual user perspective or from an individual stream perspective to kind of help better serve the video? Because this is all going out globally, so I'm just trying to better understand how you guys do that.
One nice thing about Twitch is they'll tell you. Twitch is very like discerning viewers, and like if there's like interlacing problems, they're like this video. So I like that about Twitch. But what do you guys think?
You know, we have our player gives us statistics back. Each one of our regional locations joins all the streams. So if we're doing a broadcast out of San Jose, Bangalore, RTP, and stuff is looking at the stream. And then we have a very mature audience. So if it doesn't good or look good, if we have a chat, we're instantly getting pinged.
And we use so many different platforms that we really rely on those platforms to do it. I know there are products out there that we do use on the, so LinkedIn owns lynda.com. There's a platform underneath there that really keeps track of all the different CDNs, the performance, does that. We don't do that actively now with all the different distributions, but it's something we aspire.
For the events that we can talk, you know, that we can publicly share, a lot of the stuff we do, we can't talk about the fact that we're doing them. But when we do that, I actually train people online on Patreon, and it's a really good mix of people that we're training all the time. That's kind of my farm team. And so what happens is I'll put little posts out like, hey, everyone just look at this and tell me what you think, if I think I'm having a problem. You know, like and we've had things where a CDN went down on the East Coast, but not on anywhere else. And so, and I've been on Twitter for a long time, so I've got a couple Twitter followers. And so I'll also tweet like, hey, everyone just look at this and tell me what you think. And I'll get, you know, hundreds of responses. It's amazing. You know, you think no one's listening on Twitter, and then you ask for that, and I'll get fine in Denmark, looks great in Sweden, looks good in Australia. You know, and that actually turns out to be a really good, because what I want to know, I don't want to know what a stat is. I want to know, are actual people able to connect to this right now, and average people on their standard connection.
And I think it depends on the platform. If it's a more mature platform like Brightcove or Akamai or something like that, or live stream, you've already got that built into the platform, so you can see all the different, you know, back-end stuff.
And hopefully the status page is telling the truth. So
true. Yeah, on really mature ones, Akamai has. If you've got the money to do it, it's very the level of granularity that you can get globally is astounding. But you're going to spend possibly a lot of money to do that for a big event.
Well, I've got one if no one else does. If you are somebody who doesn't have large resources of a mega conglomerate or company, what is some of the best strategies or recommendations that you'd give to somebody who's kind of bootstrapping high quality, reliable live streams?
I would say don't. I used to be a wrestler, and a long time ago, obviously. But
WWE, or what are we talking about?
No, when I was in high school, the big thing was don't stick your elbows out. Like if you put your elbows out, you're gonna get thrown, right? So don't put your elbows out when you do events. Like, this is what gets people: is they have a little bit of money and then they want to do something crazy. Like if you don't have a lot of money, do something. You know, be conservative with it. You know, like sit safely. Know that you need, from a technical perspective, you need 30 to 50% headroom of whatever you're going to do. Like it should look easy, because it's not going to be easy. By the time you go live, there was 3 things that changed, and this doesn't work over here, and everything else. And if it doesn't happen that way, just feel lucky that's the way it turned out. So you always have, like for us, all of our hardware, we always have 30 to 50% more than what we even said we were going to bring. We have, you know, you kind of keep that headroom there to react to whatever is coming in. So otherwise, you just get overwhelmed. And so, you know, for us, yes, we always have backups of everything, you know, but still, even when it's little, we still have backups of, you know, an extra USB pre and an extra Magewell, you know, if you're going into Wirecast.
Well, Dan, I know you kind of started your department from scratch. So, like, how did that look? Like, just getting going, I guess.
Well, I came in. I mean, definitely. I was wondering if this audience sort of relates to sometimes we get some nice budgets, especially hardware-wise. Yeah. And yeah, when really before LinkedIn, we were just doing streams from the beach with Wirecast.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't, content wins out. So
Yep.
if this content's compelling enough, that iPhone is enough to get it to Facebook, people will watch it. So don't overthink it.
Yeah, don't go spend a ton of money on your gear just to have it.
Make sure there's that audience there, and
Yeah.
then you can build off that. Keep it simple.
Yeah, all right, I'm getting the we're done sign. So thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate you guys coming here, and thank you guys for being on the panel.
Thank you.